All right, we're really moving along now. So just to recap now, we have sent data from the DOM into our component. Our component can have its own data. And then the last piece of this is, well, can our component get our properties, like our data, for example? I'm trying to get confused between the word properties, which is this props, and properties, which is actually maintaining state, maintaining our values or data that can change, right? So can we get, for example, this word message, can we get data from our view instance into our component? And that seems pretty straightforward. When you at first attack this, you think, well, yeah, component is inside this view instance, so why can't I just, for example, utilize message like we did at the very, very beginning? In other words, can't I just put in these curly braces and then the word message, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to try that. And, oh, I got an error. Kind of a thought that was going to happen. It says message is not defined on the instance. So method is not defined here. And the reason for that is back to the original definition of the fact that our component needs to be, we never really use the word self-contained, but it is a reusable object. And so because it's reusable and we should be able to stick it wherever we need to, it cannot be dependent on anything else to operate. In other words, it cannot rely on the fact that the view instance that it's being put inside has data that it can access. So let me try and demonstrate that point. You can get at it. For example, in this scenario, I do know that my root instance has a message in it. And so you can get at it by doing this and then $root and a period. That will work. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh that. And so I should see, let's see, what was I don't even remember, my message was hello view. So I should have hello view on here. Where did I put it? I put it, I'm not even paying attention while I talk. Okay, so I put it here and there it is. So let's put it someplace else so I can see where it's coming from. So let's put it in an H1 tag. And I'm going to move this .message into the H1 tag so I can see what it is I'm trying to accomplish when I re-render the page. All right, so now I can see that I have an H1 with the root message. So that is working. But herein lies the problem. So I'm going to create a second instance of a view, copy and paste, and this has to be unique, so I'm going to make this view 2, app 2, hello view 2, okay? And so it too can have, let's see, I'm going to go into, I've got app 2, so I'm going to come into my HTML here. I'm going to create a second div with an ID of app 2. And I'm going to put in a heading. So the idea is that this instance of view can also use my components, because components are supposed to be a reusable piece of code that I can put anywhere. And now, as long as this is message, everything will work just fine. And so view is waiting. View is waiting. I must have a bad internet connection because things are just spinning. All right, so you can see hello view 2 came up and everything is fine. So what's the problem? Well, let's say that view 2, for example, perhaps had something called the message, the thing, I don't know, doesn't matter. So now this is going to break, right? Because my component is counting on the view instance that's using it to have a property called message, but my second view instance does not have a property called message, and so we're going to have a problem. So here you can see I have a second root, and I click on headings, and course greeting and name is undefined. And it's not printing out my heading because it can't find one, because there isn't one. So how do we then send data? How should we be sending data from the view instance into the component so that way we don't run into these kinds of issues? All right, well, let's do that as a second. I'm going to do that as an H2. And the way to do that is through properties, just like we've been doing before. So let me share. So we used properties to send data from the DOM into the component, right? So we used greeting, and then we put greeting into our template. We did that in one of the beginning videos. So we're going to do the same thing with our Vue instance. We're going to send data into our component view using properties. In other words, let's create, I'm going to say this is my component title. Just FYI, and I do this all the time, if you make this capital, for whatever reason, attributes cannot be capital. So I have to make that a lowercase. And so I want to allow this component to receive property information into comp title, which I'm going to put in here. Stands for component title. So I'm going to put component title in here. So somehow now I have to have a vehicle in which I send data from the Vue instance into my component. And so the way that you're going to do that is through here, okay? Just like we did with the image tag. So if name equals Kirsten is how I'm sending data from the DOM into the property of the component, I have to use a different vehicle to say you need to look at the Vue instance. So I'm just going to type it out. vbind is what we're going to use. vbind and then comp title equals, and this instance is going to be message. So similar to what we did with images. With images we did vbind source equals, and we gave it a value, and that information was what was sent into our images element. Well, this is the same thing we're doing here. We're binding the message of the Vue into our property. So let's see if that works. So let's see, we did, okay, it should work now. So our first heading should now have, this is what we're looking at, Hello Vue. Okay, so let me kind of walk through that again. Our first headings component was asked to look at vbind, which is from the parent instance, from the instance that you're currently in, look for message. So look in here, bind, data binding, message, whatever's in message, to the property of the Vue component, and then put that value into the H2, which is what happened. And so to make it unique, let's look at the second headings. So second headings can do the same thing. It's going to vbind comp title. So the way that the component is created, it's saying if you want to send me something in the title, which this Vue instance does, it's going to tap into that property, and it's going to send itself, it's going to send into headings, or in the second instance, the thing instead. So now if we look at, I'm going to refresh the page, and remember that this is the second instance of the Vue. Let's just look at it, and then we can look at it from here. So here's the second instance, root 1, root 2. And in root 2, the second instance that we created, we should see hello. Let's see, what did we put in there? We put hello Vue 2, which is exactly what's coming out here. And I can see that displayed here. So this is why this tool really comes in handy. I know that was confusing and there's a lot going on there. The best thing is just to practice through it. But the idea here is if you just want to kind of put it in a neat package, and that's what I've been trying to do, is trying to organize this for you. So when you create a component has to be unique, it has to be standalone, and it has to not count on anything else in order to operate. So that means that if we need something from the Vue instance, it has to send it into the component. If we need something from the DOM, it has to send it to the component. And so the component is using these properties to catch any of that information that's coming from outside sources. That enables this component to exist independently of anything that needs to use it. And so we sent data in from the DOM using the properties, and we used name equals and greeting equals, and that matched our property names, and so that was fine. In order to send data in from the instance, we had to use vbind. So we use vbind and then attached to the property, and then sent that vProperty our data source. So the only reason why I created two view instances here is just to demonstrate why we needed to be cognizant of the fact that the component has to stand alone, it has to exist by itself, which makes this particular syntax not work, because it is dependent upon the fact that its view instance has message, and as long as it has message, it will work. All right, so that's a lot. The next video we're going to demonstrate, we will work through an example of utilizing some of these concepts.